The dark triad was first introduced by Paulus and Williams in the journal article The Dark Triad of Personality, Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and Psychopathy in the Journal of Research in Personality in 2002. Others introduced the light triad, which can be defined as a set of prosocial, loving, and caring characteristics or positive personality traits. Let's further discuss the term psychopathy. In antisocial personality disorder, in the DSM, there are a couple paragraphs that refer to specifying with or without psychopathy. So it's not a diagnosis, it's a specifier. And in borderline personality disorder, there is a specifier of secondary psychopathy. The term sociopathy or sociopath is outdated, and it's enough to say antisocial personality disorder. It was its former name. Before knowing this, I attempted to distinguish between the meaning of psychopath and sociopath, and then I went ahead and labeled that graphic as wrong because the word sociopath is no longer used anyway. ASPD is defined as, quote, the presence of a chronic and pervasive disposition to disregard and violate the rights of others. Manifestations include repeated violations of the law, exploitation of others, deceitfulness, impulsivity, aggressiveness, reckless disregard for the safety of self and others, and irresponsibility accompanied by a lack of guilt, remorse, and empathy. The disorder has been known by various names, including dissocial personality, psychopathic personality, and sociopathic personality. The DSM specifier for adding psychopathic features essentially relates in the first paragraph to low anxiety or fear, low levels of anxiousness or negative affectivity, and low withdrawal, detachment domain, and high levels of attention-seeking, antagonism domain. The typical course of development leading to ASPD begins with a temperamental risk and environmental adversity, oppositional defiant disorder, typically onset is before age 8, leading to conduct disorder, typical onset late childhood to adolescence, usually 10 to 16, paired with callous unemotional traits, leading to a higher risk of adult psychopathy, and then antisocial personality disorder cannot be diagnosed under age 18 and requires evidence of conduct disorder existing before age 15. Traits on the Hare Psychopathy Checklist. Glibness, superficial charm. Previous diagnosis as a psychopath. Egocentricity, which is grandiose sense of self-worth. Proneness to boredom, low frustration tolerance. Pathological lying and deception. Conning, lack of sincerity. Lack of remorse or guilt. Lack of affect and emotional depth. Callous, lack of empathy. Parasitic lifestyle. Short-tempered, poor behavioral controls. Promiscuous sexual relations, early behavior problems, lack of realistic long-term plans, impulsivity, irresponsible behavior as a parent, frequent marital relationships, juvenile delinquency, poor probation or parole risk, failure to accept responsibility for own actions, many types of offense, and drug or alcohol abuse not a direct cause of the antisocial behavior. The vulnerable dark triad includes vulnerable narcissism, borderline personality disorder, and secondary psychopathy. Borderline core features include emotional dysregulation, fear of abandonment, impulsivity, and unstable self-image. Secondary psychopathy, sometimes called reactive psychopathy, involves emotional impulsivity, trauma history, attachment wounds, unlike primary psychopathy, which is more cold and calculated. When BPD and secondary psychopathy co-occur, the individual may show intense but short-lived emotions, manipulative or reactive behaviors when attachment is threatened, empathy that can switch off under stress or perceived rejection, deep shame and rage driving defensive control or dominance behaviors. And these individuals often oscillate between vulnerability and aggression. Hurt me and I'll hurt you first. Secondary psychopathy is essentially secondary to trauma, whereas primary psychopathy has a more genetic base. And secondary psychopaths tend to have erratic behaviors influenced by their emotional responses. Bullet points about the genetic basis of primary psychopathy is pulled from twin studies and adoption studies, and estimates of heritability are around 40 to 60%. There are biological markers, including reduced amygdala reactivity, prefrontal cortex abnormalities, low physiological arousal, and callous unemotional traits are highly heritable at 50 to 70%. A pop psychology term not in the diagnostic manual is the dark empath, which refers to someone who understands emotions well via cognitive empathy. So they have high emotional intelligence but low compassion, bringing in some Machiavellian traits and secondary psychopathy. They have social charm, perceptiveness, but they're self-protective rather than genuinely caring. And they can read a room, but they lack pro-social motivation or empathy, and they use empathy as a tool, not a bridge for connection.